Picture this. It is somewhere around 14,000 years ago, give or take a few campfires, and a small band of humans is picking their way through a humid valley somewhere in what will one day be called Mexico. They do not know they are in Mexico. They do not know what a Mexico is. All they know is that their stomachs are growling louder than the jaguars prowling somewhere in the tree line, and today's foraging has been thin. Roots, a few grubs, some questionable berries that one guy insisted were probably fine. Spoiler, they were not fine. That guy is having a rough afternoon. And then someone spots it. A little cluster of bright red and orange fruits hanging off a scraggly bush, practically glowing against the green like nature's own warning label, except nobody in this group speaks nature's language. To them, it just looks like dinner. Small, round, shiny, and dangling at exactly the right height for a hungry forager to reach out and grab. Now here's where things get interesting, because this cluster of fruit is not just any fruit. This is one of the wild ancestors of what we now call the chili pepper, and the person who is about to pluck it off the branch has absolutely no idea that they are about to become one of the first humans in history to experience the sensation of their mouth catching fire without an actual fire. We like to imagine prehistoric life as this slow, cautious, deliberate thing, where every human moves like a nature documentary narrator is quietly judging their every decision. In reality, prehistoric humans were just as impulsive as we are. They saw food, they ate food, and sometimes food fought back. This was one of those times, so let's set the scene properly. Our forager will call him Ugg because every prehistoric human in these stories is somehow always named Ugg, picks a handful of these little red fruits. They smell faintly sweet, almost fruity, kind of like nothing dangerous is about to happen. Ugg pops one straight into his mouth because why wouldn't he? And for about half a second, everything is fine. There's a bit of sweetness, a bit of texture, nothing alarming, and then it hits. Capsaicin, the active compound that gives chili peppers their signature kick, does not mess around. It binds to receptors in the mouth that are normally triggered by actual heat, which means the brain gets a full, immediate, unfiltered signal that says in no uncertain terms you are currently on fire. Except Ugh is not on fire. There is no fire. There is just a small red fruit doing an extremely convincing impression of. What happens next is basically the Ice Age equivalent of a comedy sketch. Ugh's eyes go wide. His face contorts. He starts making noises that the rest of the group has genuinely never heard him make before. Somewhere between a cough, a yelp, and the sound a mammoth might make if you stepped on its foot. The rest of the tribe freezes because in a world full of predators, screaming often means something very bad has happened. Spears are raised. Eyes scan the tree line for danger. But there is no jaguar. There is no venomous snake. There is just Ugh sprinting toward the nearest stream like his life depends on it. Which, in his mind, it absolutely. He dunks his face into the cold water, gulping mouthfuls, and for a few blissful seconds it seems to help. Then he lifts his head back out, and the burning returns with a vengeance. Because here's the thing about capsaicin that early humans had no way of knowing. It's oil-based. Water does not wash it away. Water just spreads it around and buys you a few seconds of false hope before the fire comes roaring back. Meanwhile, the rest of the group is standing there completely bewildered. One of them, let's call her Ira because every prehistoric group also needs a skeptic, cautiously picks up one of the leftover fruits and gives it a sniff. It smells fine. It looks fine. She glances over at Ugh, who is now lying face down in the shallow water making sounds of deep, personal betrayal, and decides that maybe, just maybe, she should not repeat his mistake immediately. Instead, she watches. She waits. This, by the way, is basically the entire secret to how humans figured out spicy food throughout history. Somebody suffers first. Everyone else learns from a safe distance. Now you might be wondering if the pepper hurt so much, why didn't humans just avoid it forever after that first encounter? That would be the sensible thing to do, right? Touch a hot rock once, you generally don't touch it again. But peppers are a little more complicated than hot rocks, and the story of how humans went from screaming in agony to deliberately seeking this stuff out is honestly one of the more fascinating threads in the story of our species. See, plants and animals have been locked in an evolutionary arms race for a very, very long time, and chili peppers developed capsaicin as a defense mechanism. The theory that most researchers lean toward goes something like this. Mammals have teeth that grind up seeds, which destroys them before they can grow into new plants. Birds, on the other hand, swallow seeds whole and pass them through their digestive systems intact, often depositing them somewhere new, along with a nice little packet of fertilizer. So from the pepper plant's perspective, mammals are bad news, and birds are basically a free delivery service. The clever part is that birds, as it turns out, don't have the same receptor sensitivity to capsaicin that mammals do. A bird can eat the spiciest pepper on the planet and feel absolutely nothing, while a mammal takes one bite and immediately regrets every choice that led to that moment. So the peppers evolved to be spicy specifically to deter mammals while remaining perfectly appealing to birds. It's a beautifully petty piece of evolutionary strategy when you think about it. The plant essentially figured out how to say, "not for you," to an entire class of animals while rolling out the red carpet for another. Humans, being mammals, were very much included in the "not for you" category. And yet here we are, several thousand years later, dumping hot sauce on everything from eggs to ice cream, entire competitive eating circuits built around who can survive the spiciest pepper on Earth, and an entire snack food industry built on the concept of flaming. So clearly something changed along the way. Humans found a way around the plant's defenses, and honestly, that's kind of our whole thing as a species. Give us an obstacle and we will eventually turn it into a lifestyle. Let's go back to that riverbank for a second though, because Ugg's suffering was not in vain. As the burning slowly faded, replaced by this strange lingering warmth, something curious happened. He noticed he felt oddly good. A little lightheaded maybe? A little more alert. His heart was pounding, sure, but not entirely in a bad way anymore. This is actually rooted in real biology. When capsaicin triggers those heat receptors, the brain responds by releasing endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, as a way of coping with the perceived injury. Combine that with a rush of adrenaline from the initial panic, and you end up with something that feels a little bit like a high. This is not so different from why some people today genuinely enjoy the burn of extremely spicy food. There's a reason spicy food challenges are such a popular genre of content, and it's not purely masochism. There's a real physiological reward hiding on the other side of the pain, and it turns out that reward existed long before written history, long before agriculture, long before humans had words for concepts like endorphin rush. Didn't know any of that. All he knew was that the fire in his mouth eventually gave way to a strange sense of triumph, like he had just wrestled something and won. Word spreads fast in a small group of humans, especially when the story involves someone screaming and diving into a river. Ira, ever the cautious one, decides to try just a tiny nibble of the fruit herself. Not the whole thing, just a corner, barely more than a taste. And she feels it too, that slow building warmth, milder because of the smaller amount, but noticeable all the same. Instead of panicking, she's ready for it this time. She's seen what happened, she braces, and when the wave passes, she feels that same strange little lift Ugh described. This is really the turning point in the story. The moment where a defensive plant compound starts becoming a deliberate choice rather than an accidental ambush. Once you know the fire is coming and you know it eventually fades into something almost pleasant, the whole equation changes. Fear turns into curiosity. Curiosity turns into experimentation. And experimentation, as it always does with humans, eventually turns into somebody trying to figure out how to make the experience even more intense because if there's one constant across every era of human history, it's that somebody, somewhere, is always going to look at something painful and go, yeah, but what if we did more of that? Now, here's where we have to zoom out a little and talk about the bigger picture. Because this wasn't just one random tribe stumbling onto one random pepper. Wild chili peppers, botanists believe, likely originated somewhere in what is now central to southern Brazil or nearby regions of South America, and from there they spread across a huge range of the Americas long before humans arrived to start interacting with them regularly. Birds, doing their evolutionary job as intended, carried seeds across enormous distances over thousands of years, spreading these plants throughout diverse environments from lowland forests to highland slopes. By the time humans crossed into the Americas, likely moving down through migration routes that took generations to travel, wild chili peppers were already scattered throughout many of the regions these early peoples would come to call home. This means the story of humans meeting spicy peppers for the first time probably wasn't a single dramatic event with one unlucky pioneer. It was probably happening independently, over and over in different valleys, different river systems, different corners of a vast and largely unmapped continent. Dozens, if not hundreds of unlucky foragers across generations, each having their own personal ugh moment, each discovering the same painful lesson the hard way, which honestly makes the whole story even funnier when you think about it. Somewhere out there, across a span of centuries, there were probably countless separate incidents of humans grabbing a handful of unfamiliar red berries, taking a confident bite, and immediately regretting every decision that led them to that particular patch of forest. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. If prehistoric humans had a blooper reel, chili peppers would probably account for a solid chunk of the runtime. Archaeological evidence actually backs up just how long humans have been dealing with and eventually embracing these peppers. Researchers studying ancient starch residues on grinding stones and cooking vessels found in regions of the Americas have identified traces of chili pepper compounds dating back roughly 6,000 years, and some evidence suggests human interaction with these plants may stretch back even further. That means for thousands of years, generation after generation of humans were not just tolerating the burn, but actively cultivating, harvesting, and incorporating these peppers into their daily lives. Which raises the obvious question: why would you keep doing something that hurts? Well, aside from the endorphin high we already talked about, there are some very practical reasons that likely played a role too. For one, capsaicin has natural antimicrobial properties. In a world without refrigerators, without any real understanding of bacteria, and without a Tuesday morning trip to a grocery store, keeping food from spoiling was a constant and serious challenge. Adding chili peppers to stored food or cooked meals may have helped slow down bacterial growth, essentially giving early humans an early, unintentional form of food preservation. They didn't know the science. They just noticed that food lasted a little longer, tasted a little different, and didn't make people sick quite as often. Good enough reason to keep doing it. There's also the simple fact that once your taste buds adapt to spice, bland food starts to feel, well, bland. Humans are flavor-seeking creatures. We get bored of the same taste over and over, and chili peppers offered something genuinely new in a world where the flavor palette otherwise consisted mostly of whatever roots, meat, and foraged plants happened to be locally available. Adding a spicy kick turned a plain meal into something with a little more personality, something with a little more, dare we say it, spice. Let's rejoin our little group for a moment, because their story doesn't end at the riverbank. As word spreads through the group about this strange fiery fruit, curiosity begins to outweigh caution. Someone suggests, in whatever primitive gesture and grunt language they're using, that maybe cooking the fruit might change things. Maybe fire could tame the fire, in a delightfully ironic twist. So that evening, as the group gathers around their campfire, someone tosses a handful of the peppers into the coals almost as an experiment. The smell that rises up is nothing like the sharp, almost fruity scent of the raw pepper. It's smoky, rich, and strangely appetizing, wafting through camp and drawing curious noses from every direction. When the peppers are pulled back out, slightly charred, someone works up the nerve to try a piece. The heat is still there, but it's different now. Mellower, somehow, rounder, mixed with a smoky sweetness that makes the whole experience far more approachable. This, right here, might be one of the earliest unintentional discoveries of cooking as a way to modify and control flavor intensity, something that would go on to become a defining feature of human cuisine for the rest of history. Heat transforms capsaicin's interaction with other compounds in the pepper, often mellowing the sharper notes while enhancing the deeper, smokier flavors. Our prehistoric campers didn't understand the chemistry, obviously, but they understood the result. Cooked peppers tasted incredible, and from that point forward, tossing a few peppers onto the fire alongside the evening's meat probably became something of a tradition. It's worth pausing here to imagine just how much trial and error went into figuring all of this out. There were no cookbooks, no wise elder passing down a perfected spice blend recipe, just generation after generation of humans poking, prodding, tasting, occasionally suffering, and slowly refining their relationship with this strange plant until they had something resembling actual culinary knowledge. Every "wow, this tastes amazing" moment in prehistoric cooking history was probably preceded by dozens of "why does my face feel like this?" moments that nobody bothered writing down, mostly because writing hadn't been invented yet. As generations passed, something remarkable started happening. Groups who had regular access to these peppers began deliberately encouraging their growth. Instead of simply stumbling across wild pepper bushes while foraging, people began saving seeds from the plants that produced the tastiest, most desirable fruits and planting them closer to their settlement. This is, in a very real sense, one of the earliest steps toward agriculture. As we understand it, humans taking an active role in shaping the natural world around them to suit their preferences rather than just passively accepting whatever nature happened to provide. Over thousands of years, this selective process led to the domestication of several distinct chili pepper species, laying the groundwork for the incredible diversity of peppers we have today. From the tiny, intensely fiery chiltepin peppers still found growing wild in parts of Mexico, believed by many researchers to closely resemble the ancestral wild peppers our prehistoric friends first encountered, all the way up to the massive, comparatively mild bell peppers that dominate grocery store produce aisles today. The entire spectrum traces its roots back to those same early, painful, accidental discoveries. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how wild that timeline really is. A group of hungry foragers biting into an unfamiliar red fruit and nearly losing their minds from the burn eventually led, over thousands of years of cultivation and selective breeding, to an entire global spice trade, to sriracha bottles sitting on diner tables, to competitive hot wing eating contests, to that one friend everyone has who insists on adding an unreasonable amount of hot sauce to literally everything they eat, regardless of whether it makes sense. All of that traces back to a moment of prehistoric agony beside a river. Now, it's important to note that peppers weren't just a fun flavor experiment for early humans. As communities began to rely more heavily on cultivated peppers, these plants started weaving themselves into deeper aspects of daily life, including medicine, ritual, and social structure. Some evidence suggests that certain early cultures believed peppers held protective or even spiritual property, given how dramatically and immediately they affected the human body. Imagine being an early human with no scientific framework for understanding biology, watching a tiny piece of fruit cause your eyes to water, your skin to flush, and your heart to race, all within seconds. It probably felt less like eating and more like unleashing some kind of small, controlled force of nature directly inside your own body. It would make sense that such an intense, almost otherworldly, physical reaction might get wrapped up in early spiritual or ceremonial beliefs. There's also something to be said about the social bonding aspect of shared discomfort, which, frankly, still holds true today. Think about it. How many times have you seen people gathered around, egging each other on to try something spicy, laughing as someone's face turns red and their eyes start watering? That exact same dynamic likely played out around prehistoric campfires thousands of years ago. Someone dares someone else to eat a whole pepper. Laughter erupts as the inevitable suffering unfolds. Bonds are formed over shared, ridiculous, self-inflicted pain. Some things about being human never really change, they just get slightly less deadly serious and slightly more entertaining over time. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about biology, because there's a fascinating twist to this story that a lot of people don't know about. Remember how we mentioned that capsaicin evolved specifically to deter mammals while leaving birds unaffected? Well, it turns out humans developed something of a workaround to that evolutionary defense mechanism, and it has to do with how quickly our taste receptors can adapt. Repeated exposure to capsaicin actually reduces sensitivity over time. This is why people who regularly eat spicy food can handle dramatically hotter peppers than someone trying spicy food for the first time. The receptors essentially become desensitized with consistent exposure, requiring a stronger and stronger stimulus to produce the same burning sensation. This means that over generations, communities that regularly consumed peppers were likely building up a tolerance, allowing them to enjoy spicier and spicier varieties without the same level of distress that our friend Ugh experienced during his first encounter. This desensitization process probably played a huge role in why chili peppers became so deeply ingrained in various early American cultures, rather than being written off as an inedible curiosity after that first painful encounter. Once a community adapts, spicy food stops being an obstacle and starts being an asset, offering flavor complexity, food preservation benefits, and that pleasant endorphin boost, all without quite as much suffering involved. Of course, tolerance only goes so far, and there's a wide range of pepper intensity out there, something modern science measures using something called the Scoville scale, named after the pharmacist who developed the original testing method back in the early 20th century. On this scale, something like a bell pepper sits at 0, essentially no detectable heat at all, while something like a jalapeno sits in the thousands. And the most extreme peppers bred by modern enthusiasts can reach well over 1 million Scoville Scoville units, hot enough to cause genuine medical concern if consumed carelessly. The wild peppers our prehistoric ancestors were likely encountering probably fell somewhere in a moderate range, nowhere near the artificially intensified extremes that exist today, but still absolutely enough to cause a very memorable first encounter. It's genuinely fascinating to think about how something that started as a plant's clever evolutionary defense mechanism eventually became one of humanity's most treasured and widely used flavor tools. Peppers didn't just survive human contact, they thrived because of it, spreading across the globe far beyond their original American range once European explorers encountered them centuries later and carried them back across the Atlantic, eventually integrating into cuisines throughout Europe, Africa, and Asia so thoroughly that many people today mistakenly assume peppers have always been a native part of these regional food cultures. Indian curry without chili peppers, Thai food without that signature heat, Korean cuisine without gochugaru, all of these seem almost unthinkable today, yet all of them represent relatively recent additions in the grand timeline of human history, all tracing back to those original wild American peppers and the brave, unlucky foragers who first tangled with them. Let's return to our prehistoric campsite one final time, because there's something oddly beautiful about imagining how this story might have concluded for that particular group. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the initial fear surrounding these fiery little fruits gradually faded, replaced by genuine appreciation. Our unfortunate pioneer likely became something of a local legend, the guy who ate the fire fruit and dove into the river. Maybe younger members of the tribe grew up hearing the story, laughing as it got exaggerated over the years, the pepper growing hotter and Ug's reaction growing more dramatic retelling, the way stories tend to evolve when they're passed down without the benefit of anyone writing it down accurately. Meanwhile, the peppers themselves became a regular part of the group's diet, transforming from a terrifying unknown into a valued resource. Maybe they started intentionally seeking out more of these plants during their foraging trips, gathering seeds, watching where the healthiest bushes grew, slowly beginning that long, slow process of learning how to encourage these plants to grow closer to home. None of them could have possibly imagined that thousands of years later, their small, accidental discovery would evolve into a defining feature of cuisines across the entire planet, discussed and debated and enjoyed by billions of people who have never even heard of them, yet who owe a small, spicy debt to their curiosity and their suffering all those millennia ago. It really is remarkable when you think about just how much of human culinary history boils down to someone, somewhere, being brave or foolish enough to try something new, suffering the consequences, and somehow deciding that the experience was worth repeating. Fire itself was probably approached with similar caution long before that, and yet here we are, an entire species built on a foundation of curious, occasionally reckless experimentation. Spicy peppers are just one small, fiery thread in that much larger tapestry, but it's a thread worth appreciating, especially the next time you find yourself reaching for the hot sauce without a second thought, treating an experience that once caused genuine panic among our ancestors as nothing more than a routine flavor enhancement. So the next time your mouth is burning from something spicy, whether it's a jalapeno popper, a plate of spicy wings, or an ill-advised amount of hot sauce on your tacos, take a second to appreciate the strange winding journey that flavor took to reach your plate. Somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a hungry, unsuspecting human bit into a small red fruit expecting a sweet snack and got a face full of fire instead. They panicked. They probably screamed. They likely dove into the nearest body of water in a desperate, ultimately futile attempt to extinguish a fire that wasn't real. And yet, against all odds, that painful first encounter didn't scare humanity away from spicy food forever. Instead, it planted the seed, quite literally, for one of the most beloved and widespread flavor traditions in human history. From a single unlucky bite beside some ancient, unnamed river, to spice markets in India overflowing with color and aroma, to Mexican mercados stacked high with dried chilies of every shape and size, to the hot sauce aisle at your local grocery store stretching on, seemingly forever with dozens of brands promising varying levels of regret, the story of the chili pepper is really the story of human curiosity itself. Our willingness to try the unfamiliar, to suffer occasionally for the sake of discovery, and to turn even our most painful mistakes into something worth celebrating. And somewhere out there, if you squint hard enough at the long, strange arc of human history, you can almost picture Ugh sitting by his fire thousands of years ago, nursing his still tingling lips, looking down at the small, unassuming red fruit in his hand, and deciding against every instinct screaming at him to never touch the thing again, to give it one more try. And really, in that one small, stubborn, slightly ridiculous decision, an entire chapter of human food history quietly began.